elevar su nivel de sostenibilidad al ser vinculados de manera más eficiente con energías renovables. Los invito ahora a que disfrutemos de este panel sobre aprovechamiento de recursos energéticos residuales y renovables en los distritos térmicos. Les recuerdo que al finalizar de este panel tendremos un espacio para responder las preguntas que nos envíen a través del chat y pues todas las intervenciones las pueden escuchar, ya ustedes lo saben, en su idioma original, o si desean traducción simultánea tenemos una sala alterna para que ustedes puedan ingresar también ahí. En este momento nos acompañan en este panel los expertos internacionales. Antonio Di Cecca, él es jefe de gestión de activos de ENGIE. El señor Di Cecca tiene una maestría en Ingeniería Aeroespacial del Politécnico di Torino y una maestría en Ingeniería y Gestión de Energía del École des Mines de París. Es el jefe de gestión de activos de ENGIE en Dubái desde el 2018. Previo a esto, trabajó como jefe de proyectos y desarrollos de negocios en Clean Space ENGIE, también el sistema de distritos de enfriamiento más grande de Europa. Nos acompañará también Andreas Journey, él es director de la Asociación Distritos Térmicos de Suiza. El señor Journey tiene una maestría en Geología de la Universidad de Berna y un posgrado en Construcciones Hidráulicas Urbanas de la Escuela Politécnica Federal de Zúrich. Actualmente es el director de la Asociación de Distritos Energéticos de Suiza y subgerente del Departamento de Energía en Reiser Ingenieur S.A., empresa especializada en temas energéticos, en redes de acueducto y alcantarillado. Trabajó también en Colombia entre 1997 y 2003 en la Sociedad de Acueducto, Alcantarillado y Aseo de Barranquilla y fue el encargado del estudio del acuífero de Santa Marta. Fue director también de gestión de residuos y subgerente de saneamiento en Barranquilla, subgerente técnico de acueducto y saneamiento de Hidrolago S.A. en el estado de Zulia, Venezuela, y subgerente de gestión ambiental. También nos acompañará el panelista Andreas Peter, jefe de gestión de activos de Industrial Works Basel. El señor Andreas Peter es ingeniero mecánico, ha trabajado en la construcción de túneles y diseño hidráulico en la industria de la maquinaria. Desde el 2011 trabaja en el sector de suministro de energía y es jefe de gestión de activos de calor en Industrial Works Basel, IW Suiza. La moderación de este panel estará a cargo del ingeniero Thomas Stetter, experto en Internacional en Distritos Energéticos y consultor de la Oficina de Cooperación Económica y Desarrollo SECO de la Embajada de Suiza en Colombia. El señor Stetter es ingeniero mecánico con especialidad en economía y administración de negocios del Swiss Federal Institute of Technology de Zurich. Tiene una amplia experiencia en la implementación de proyectos de energías renovables, proyectos de mitigación del cambio climático y en la gerencia de redes urbanas de enfriamiento en Suiza. Actualmente desarrolla e implementa proyectos fotovoltaicos y asesora proyectos de distritos térmicos, incluyendo la Estrategia Nacional de Distritos Térmicos en Colombia desde el año 2013. En este momento le cedo la palabra al ingeniero Thomas Stetter, quien moderará este panel que lleva por nombre Aprovechamiento de recursos energéticos residuales y renovables en los distritos térmicos. Entonces, recibimos en este momento al señor Thomas. Thomas, bienvenido, gracias por acompañarnos, gracias por liderar este interesante panel y bueno, te dejo este espacio para que desarrolles este tema tan interesante con tus panelistas.
Muchas gracias, Laura, y muchas gracias a los organizadores del tercer congreso por la invitación de conversar en un panel del tema más importante que hay en distritos térmicos. Lo digo un poco para broma, pero también porque es verdad. El aprovechamiento de los recursos energéticos residuales y renovables en los distritos térmicos es un tema clave para el desarrollo futuro de los distritos térmicos. ¿Por qué? Porque en el 2050 queremos ser CO2 neutrales. Y logramos este objetivo solamente si realizamos los distritos térmicos con energías renovables o residuales. Let me change to English because one of the panelists is not speaking Spanish. Welcome the panelists as well. I will not introduce them again. They have been very kindly introduced by Laura already. So happy to have you with us. It was not easy to find 3 panelists with the first name starting with A, but we succeeded. So happy to have you with us. And I was saying our topic is the most important topic of this whole Congress. A little bit as a joke, obviously, but also because, as mentioned by Isabel in the speech before, as mentioned in the panel of Natalia Mayorga on the first day, as mentioned by the keynote speaker Reto Detli on the first day, the use of renewable energies or residual energies in new energy districts is key. So when we prepared this panel, we decided that we would not do long introductions on the persons and the institutions, but that we would interchange quickly in between others to wake the people listening a bit up. And so let's do it this way. And as a first round, why do you work in energy districts and not in aero industry or in tunnels anymore? So what is your personal motivation to do what you are doing? Perhaps you can share some motivation with us. Andreas Hurni, what do you think?
Thank you, Thomas, for the introduction. Well, I've been working mainly in water and wastewater management and in district heating systems, also water that is circulated. So it's very close to water and waste management. And at the same time, I have been specializing in energy themes lately. The last 10 years, I've been working in questions about energy use, energy efficiency, concerned with water and wastewater management. So I'm working in the energy transition in Switzerland. And, also, I'm helping to do this transition in other countries, if I can help.
Great. Antonio, you even went as far as Dubai to implement energy districts. What motivates you?
First of all, do you hear me? You don't hear me, right? Yes? Okay. Yes, thanks, Thomas. Thanks, everyone. It's a pleasure to be in this panel. I have been in district cooling energy since more than 10 years now. And of course, when we think about cooling, we think about the most hottest countries in the world. So this is why I moved to Middle East, because ENGIE is putting district cooling and district energy in general as a core business backbone of the urban development in the cities. So we have been developing district energy activities worldwide. And in 2017, we have acquired a stake in the leader in district cooling in the region, which is called Tabrid, and was leading this process. And then I found my place here, so to develop more sustainability in the Middle East through district cooling. So the real motivation, to answer your question, is looking for sustainability and to do some concrete actions towards the net zero carbon targets where everybody is talking.
Thanks a lot. Andreas Peter, also very concretely, you are the head of asset management within Industrial Works Basel. So you contribute every day to the correct functioning of energy districts. What motivates you?
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Laura and Thomas, for this kind introduction. I decided 10 years ago to change into the energy sector, and my motivation is to contribute to the transition of our energy systems. And I think in the energy infrastructure, we can contribute with a long-term thinking and a long-term investments, and that's what motivates me.
Thank you. And I know that you have a lot of renewable energies in your energy districts in Basel, mostly on heating, but also cooling districts. So as head of asset management, does this make your life more complicated?
The use of renewable energies, you mean? No, I'd say it makes life more interesting and more meaningful. But of course, more possibilities, more complexity. That's also an effect. But I wouldn't say it makes the asset management more difficult.
Okay, even though it's intermittent energy, partially at least, so the management could be a bit more complicated.
Yeah. Also,
Andreas,
the calculations are also a bit more complicated or more complex.
Andreas Hurni, you have the overall vision of all energy districts in Switzerland. From your experience, what would you say are the most important success factors to implement successfully an energy district, and especially concerning the inclusion of renewable energies? What are the most important success factors? We cannot hear you. Now it should work.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Well, I would like to mention three main factors. One, I think, is internalization of internal costs. That means that CO2 emissions have to have a cost. Otherwise, fossil fuels have a big advantage over renewable energy. That's one thing. You have to it's necessary to pay for damage that you cause to the environment or to the public health using fossil fuels. And with that, you can help the renewable energy to be used for district heating and cooling systems. So you need a price for CO2 emissions. We have these systems in Switzerland since 2009, and the price is now going up to next year up to about $130 per ton of CO2. It's quite a high price. So that's an important factor to help renewable energy use in Switzerland. What you also need, the second point, is a clear legal framework at national, provincial, and municipal level. In Switzerland, the situation is quite complicated because in the constitution, the strategy level should be at the federal level. The buildings are on the provincial level, and district heating is somewhere in between. So it's not really clear who is responsible for district heating in Switzerland. That's one of the problems for the evolution, for the construction of district heating systems. And concerning energy planning is normally responsibility of at the city level. So you have the three different levels of organization in the state, and the coordination between these three levels doesn't always work as it should. So that's an important factor, to have a clear legal framework. And the third point, I already mentioned it a little bit, energy planning is very important. At municipal or at regional level, you need a very intelligent energy planning in order to use all the available heat sources, energy sources for your district heating networks. And that needs a very good planning of the networks. I think these are the three main factors for success of district heating networks.
Thanks a lot. That's very clear. Antonio, there seems to be a problem with the acoustics. So if it doesn't work as we plan it now, you may switch also to Spanish, so we don't have to use the translation. But let's try once again with the translation. Andreas Hurni mentioned three factors: a price on CO2, a clear legal framework on different levels, and an intelligent energy planning. Are any of these factors fulfilled in Middle East? And if not, how do you incorporate successfully energy districts with the use of renewable energies?
Yes, I mean, these are three fundamental pillars. I hope you hear me. If not, give me a sign. Anyways. You don't hear?
Now you are back again, but not on your mobile. Antonio, ¿por qué no hablas español? Yo sé que tú puedes también hablar bien en español.
¿Ahora me escuchas?
Sí.
Sí, and if I speak in English, it's okay?
I cannot give you an answer to that. These need to be responded by the organizers.
Okay, let me try to continue, and if you don't hear, we switch to Spanish. So yeah, I was saying that the carbon CO2 emissions, it's a very important driver. Although this is not, we don't have the same situation in all the regions worldwide, because when there is no price, no carbon market, it's complicated, and no specific policies to CO2 emission reductions is not the first driver that the policymakers or even investors will look at. But definitely, this is something that is becoming more and more urgent in the agenda of all the countries. So, as we saw in the last COP in Glasgow, many developing countries are aligned to net zero carbon emission by 2050 for United Arab Emirates, or even India 2070. Okay, are long-term targets, but in any case, there is an engagement. So this will be a push, important driver for developing of more sustainable and environmental friendly cooling systems. I would say that here in Middle East, unfortunately, today the main driver is still the price. I will be very transparent on this. I don't want to build a very fake scenario, but of course the price is the main driver when we talk about private investment. But because the district cooling here in the region is mostly private initiative, when we compare what's happening in Europe, especially, for example, in France, I can give different examples. There are different business models, but the most common is the public concession, where the concessionaire is the municipality or the anyways the government, and there is a kind of guarantee and also subsidies that can incentivize the investment and attract different actors. I would say also that there is a strong push now in Middle East for energy efficiency. And of course, when we look at the electricity use, end use, cooling is the first place. So of course, district cooling has an important role to play to reduce the impact on the electricity network, on the peak loads. And this is also an economical impact on the network infrastructure, because it's a huge investment that will require additional network and additional peak capacities for meeting the peak demand. So I would say this is one aspect that is quite important. If we want to talk about also sustainability of cooling, this is another important topic, and we see more and more economies switching to different energy mix, integrating renewables in the grids, even though it produces a lot of problems also in the dispatching, etc. Because variable sources of renewable are not easy to manage. But this is a clear advantage for district energy in general. We have different examples of integration of renewable energy in district cooling. And I would say in district cooling, this is we can see it in two ways. Either we use a district cooling which is connected to the electrical grid, but the electrical mix is in favor of renewables. So we indirectly use renewable energy through the electricity grid. And this is what we see almost everywhere in many European countries. Either we try to implement the renewable energy directly in the system. Of course, this is more complicated when we consider isolated systems where they have to be connected to, I don't know, a solar farm with battery storage, or a wind farm with storage without interconnection with the grid. So this is a theoretical scheme that I have not seen applied anywhere. But I would say that it's much easier for district energy, since they are urban infrastructure, to use and to profit of the local resources, available resources that are in the city. And here we can talk about aquifers, so seawater, river, lakes, geothermal energy. These are all renewable sources. And this is the case of the district cooling in Paris. We have other examples here in Middle East, in Bahrain, and you have very good examples in Switzerland with the lake. But also, I think the most important part is the waste energy that can be used in district cooling, coupling the cooling with heating and electricity in a kind of multi-utility service model. This can enhance the integration of waste energy in the system. And we have different examples of waste energy from incineration. In Barcelona, the district cooling in Barcelona is using directly the steam from the waste energy through absorption chillers to produce cooling. We have the use of geothermal, either deep geothermal with heat pumps, or superficial geothermal energy. We have a few projects in Paris, especially using the deep geothermal with heat pumps. But also here in Middle East, we are exploring the possibility to use geothermal energy to produce cooling. And we have another example of use of sewage water from the urban system if it exists, and use this as a source, additional source for producing heating and cooling through heat pumps. I will stop here. Otherwise, I would take all the time. Sorry.
Thanks a lot, Antonio. That was an interesting summary. So let's dig a bit more into the use of residual and renewable energies. And Andreas Peter, first question, what motivates Industrial Works Basel to use renewable energies in its energy mix? And second question, what are the most successful examples that you can name that use residual or renewable energies?
In Basel, we have a strong focus on renewable energies, traditionally, but also by the legislation. So we are forced to use most possible renewable energies in our electricity, but also in the heat distribution system. So at the moment, our legislation is to use 80% renewable energies or waste energy use in the district heat, and we have a local but a 900 gigawatt hours district heat system. So there is 80% of it has to be CO2 neutral or without carbon dioxide. And electricity, we have 100%. That is coming from the water energy power plants. So it's a motivation, but it's also the law. We are forced to use that, and it's also the governmental strategy who forces us to have most renewable energies as possible.
So in a way, you are confirming what Andreas Hurni was saying, a price on CO2 or a legal obligation, legal framework which is clear. And Andreas was mentioning a third element, energy planning. I guess this is in place too in Basel, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. It's the energy planning on heat is not so old. It's 2017. It was with the new energy law. It was defined, and now we have energy plan for heat. So every district is named by which heat source you should use there.
So we see quite a strong influence of the state and of legislation in Switzerland, which clearly is something that is mostly lacking in Colombia. And I know that the Energy District project in Colombia is working on generating these framework conditions which favor energy districts. Andreas Hurni, now talking a bit more about cooling districts. The ones you know in Switzerland, do they use residual or renewable energies? And if yes, which ones? And what would you recommend to Colombia to transfer this experience?
Well, yes, in cooling systems in Switzerland, renewable energy sources are used. Mainly it's lake water or groundwater, or then also wastewater that is being used. And what Andreas Peter told also, or Antonio told, it's also possible to use heat to produce cooling. So it's waste heat that can be used for cooling systems. So yes, it's the case. It's used, for example, in Lugano. There's a lake water system used for cooling a data center of the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology. Groundwater, there are similar examples in Switzerland. And also with wastewater, there sometimes is a combination of district heating and district cooling using wastewater at the same time. There's, for example, a project in Lucerne that is using this solution. From the financial point of view, it's very interesting to have this combination of heating and cooling at the same time, because you can sell more kilowatt hours. That makes it more attractive for investors. For concerning your second,
isn't this also already one recommendation to Colombia? The tropical part of Colombia, which is most of Colombia, they don't have seasons, so the energy, the cooling is used all 12 months over the year. So economics should be a lot easier to reach than in a seasonal Switzerland, isn't it?
Yes, because in Switzerland you need cooling maybe 1,000 hours per year, so about the 8th part of the year. It's a very short period in summertime, and the rest of the year you don't need cooling. And that, on the other hand, you need heating during the whole year, much less in summertime or in spring or autumn, but mainly use heat in wintertime. So we have a distribution that is very different for heating and cooling. So the difference to Colombia are very great. I've been living in Barranquilla, so I know it's quite hot there, 28 degrees centigrade. So you need mainly cooling in these cities. And I think it's very important to have pilot projects, successful pilot projects, in order to yes, begin an evolution of these district energy district systems in Colombia. So that's, and you have to plan all these systems very carefully in order to have really successful examples. Because if you don't plan it right, there's can be some danger that it doesn't work on long term.
If I understand you correctly, one of the advantages of the renewable energies you are mentioning that are used in Switzerland is also that they are for free or almost for free.
It depends. For example, waste heat from waste incineration plants usually is you can get it at a very low cost, but there are also examples using wastewater. Normally it's for free if you use wastewater for district heating or district cooling. If you have groundwater or lake water as a source, you have to pay concession costs to the provinces, or in Colombia it would be departamentos. So you need to pay something, but it's not really the main cost of a district heating or cooling systems, but you have to pay something for the use of groundwater and lake water. And the main, you can also shortly mention the energy mix in the heat production in Switzerland. We have 77% of waste heat and renewable heat in the district heating networks in Switzerland. We have more than 1,000 networks distributed over whole Switzerland, and that's the mix. 77% is renewable or waste heat, and the rest is fossil, mainly natural gas.
And probably if there were not that peak in wintertime, you could make it with 100% renewables, correct?
Yes, in wintertime you need to cover the peaks of consumption, or you use also the fossil energy in order to have a backup. If, for example, a big heat pump doesn't work for some time, you need to have an alternative. So for these situations, you often integrate still the fossil energy. So
we have an interesting question from the audience. And it corresponds to something we have partially discussed already, which is the urban energy planning. How important is urban energy planning from your point of view to successfully implement energy districts? So a quick vote between 1 and 10. What would you say? 1 is the least important, 10 is the most important.
At least 7 or 8 of 10, at least.
I would confirm 7.
We cannot hear you, Antonio.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I would say even more, 8 or 9, because if there is no urban planning to integrate this infrastructure in the urban development, it's impossible. It's a big barrier to district energy.
Well, that was a very clear answer. Thanks a lot. I hope that this has reached Colombia, this message. Thanks a lot. Now, let's Antonio Di Cecca. So you are working in hot countries. Andreas Hurni said there's a big difference between Switzerland and Colombia. So the difference between Middle East and Colombia, there are differences like humidity probably, but the temperature is quite similar, and the necessity to provide cooling the whole year long is also quite similar. So do you have districts where you use renewable energies for cooling in Middle East? Or is it still all fossil? And if there is renewable energies used, which ones are they? And do you think this can be transferred directly to Colombia, or are there differences? You know Colombia well, I know.
Yes, very good question, and I would try. You hear me? Yes. I would try to answer with some examples. Middle East, certainly we have a lot of similarities with Colombia in terms of climate, very hot.
Now we lost you again. Your mobile went out. Okay, you are back again, I think.
Thomas?
Yep.
Yes, sorry. I was saying that Colombia is there is very similar, lot of similarities with the climate. So definitely there is something that we can transpose. Here in Middle East, the energy mix is fossil. More than most of the electricity is produced with natural gas at the moment. More and more renewables are integrated in the grid.
Sorry, we cannot hear you, Antonio. No. Now I think you are back.
I lost the audio.
Yes.
Thomas, I lost the audio. Do you hear me?
We hear you well, yes. From the organizers, is that okay like that? Give me a quick feedback in writing. Antonio continues.
Okay. And I can continue where I stopped. So basically, if we look at the renewable integration in the Middle East for district cooling, we don't have basically many examples. The only thing is the use of free cooling, not really free cooling, but at least seawater for the heat rejection. And this can be assimilated to some, let's say, green cooling production. But as far as the integration of other renewable sources that have been discussed previously, we don't have any example at the moment. But doesn't mean that this will not be explored. First of all, we need some incentives to integrate renewable sources. But I would say this is also a natural development of district energy, because when we look at cooling and we look at the pattern of cooling demand, this is perfectly matching with, for example, the solar energy. So when we have a peak in the solar energy, we have basically this occurs around midday during the hot summer, also in winter, by anyways, because here the need for cooling is winter and summer. We have the same pattern for cooling demand. So where both cooling demand and energy solar PV is peaking at the same time. So this is very interesting implementation in district cooling, because it avoids the problem of how we match how to supply and at the matching demand supply at peak hours. So this is something that is certainly interesting to explore. And if we couple with this the storage, which allows to shift the demand in a period where the electricity peak is low, this will encourage also the integration of other sources, renewable sources in the system, because it makes district energy system much more flexible. Storing the energy in the night and having partially the peak demand satisfied by wind or solar during the day. So this is an interesting missing point. And I would say another incentive that could be considered is the integration of electricity tarification, which distinguish between peak and off-peak hours, to stimulate the integration of new renewable sources and coupled with storage.
Yeah, I think you mentioned a few important points there. So the coherence between photovoltaics and cooling, I agree with you. That's a very important point. And Colombia has also a lot of sun, so this can be used. And I also am convinced that storage in combination with intermittent renewable energies is an important pillar. So, Andreas Peter, in IWB Basel, do you use storage, or is storage planned to be used in one of your energy networks?
Yes, we use storage. I would confirm what Antonio said. The difference between hot countries and cold countries, or in the energy system, maybe that's one of the most important difference, that this demand and energy suns with the energy situation from the sun, and because seasonal storage is much more difficult than a daily storage, and we try to do daily storage in the thermal systems, but seasonal storage in the thermal systems is really heavy and expensive, and it needs a huge space. But we do storages. We in the thermal systems we have about daily or weekly storages we are planning, but in our urban net seasonal storage is not realistic.
And how do you realize storage? Is it water or ice, or what is
It is at the moment it is water. We have at the moment a research project for other mediums like ice or salt, but for big storages at the moment it's water.
Andreas Hurden, if, to have a bit more broader look at Switzerland, but staying with storage, what storage systems do you know of, and which kind of media do they use?
I think it's 98% it's water, or even 99%. The other examples, the 1% are research projects or pilot projects of EMPA or other, yes, universities.
Okay, and one of the differences between individual solutions and energy districts is that energy districts have a higher investment cost in the beginning and lower cost during operation. This for a country like Switzerland, which is very stable and has a long history of stable environment, is much easier to digest than for Colombia, which is a country which much more with another risk profile, to call it like that. So, Andreas Hurni, do you agree with that statement? And if yes, how do you make sure in Switzerland that an investor has enough investment security to realize the investment? And what would you recommend to Colombia to get to that same framework conditions?
I think an important point is subsidies from different levels, state level, provincial level, municipal level. There also exist foundations that give some money to renewable energy district systems. So that helps a lot to convince the investors to invest in energy district systems. I think this is a very important point in this theme. On the other hand, you need also long contracts with the clients, normally 20, 30 years if possible. So it's very important to have long contracts. That's the other point that gives you a certain guarantee, gives this guarantee to investor to some security to get his money back. But on the other hand, there are very few investors that want to invest in long-term projects. That's the other side. Normally, at state level, provincial level, it's possible to use these resources for longer time. But private investors, banks usually have much shorter times. They calculate with 4 years, 5 years, something like that. If you're happy, 8 years. So it would be ideal to have longer contract times. But that's not always the case. But that would help a lot to distribute the high investments at the beginning over a longer period of time.
Andreas Peter, I think the long-term contracts are helpful, no question about it, to make a project bankable. But from my experience, once a client is connected to an energy district, he never goes back to an individual solution. Do you share this experience or not?
Yes, I would share that. We have both situations. We have a contract. We have long-term contracts, 20 years or 15 years, but we have also customers who are on district heat systems who can leave anytime. But that it's not the case. Once they are connected, they stay. I can confirm.
So, Antonio, I see that you are nodding. So you agree on that subject. How do you finance in Middle East? Is also not a very secure world. How do you finance energy districts in the Middle East?
I would say that this is exactly the reason why many investors are interested in district energy, especially in the region, because I agree with what Andreas said before. Banks are not willing to go, or investment funds are reasoning at short term. But on the other hand, if we look at what we can, which kind of investment we can do, either we are very risk adverse and we go with very stable investment, or we try to find a kind of hybrid situation. I would say that District Energy is in this hybrid position because we have long-term contracts, which assures a kind of security for the investor, but also we have a very clear visibility of what will be the revenues during all this period, because this depends on the tariff system that is embedded in the business model. If we build the tariff system in a way to attract to justify the high investment, we can justify also banks and loans for longer period because everything is very clear and very predictable. We cannot have we have a kind of compensation between the fixed revenues and the variable revenues, and this can mitigate the risk on the variable part. I would also add that here in Middle East, the business model is a bit different from what we see in Europe, for example. Here in Middle East, most of the district cooling contracts are based on the fixed rate. So most of the EBITDA is coming from the fixed part, which incentivize private investors and equities to be present in this market. And I totally agree on the statement that has been done from both Andreas on the also the guarantee that has to be provided by the off-taker, because in front of us we need to have a strong and reliable off-taker.
Okay, thanks a lot. So there is a question from the audience, again, to all of you. Should we use hydrogen in energy districts? So I have my own opinion, but I let you first start on it. Who wants to raise the hand? Please.
If you want to produce hydrogen, you need between 3 and 4 kilowatt hour to produce 1 kilowatt hour of hydrogen. So it's not very energy efficient. Maybe in a country where you have a lot of sun, the situation can be different than here in Europe. Here in Europe, it's not really a good business model. I think in Switzerland, it's not economically viable. It's just viable where you have a surplus production of energy. For example, if you have a wind farm or you have a big photovoltaic plant, there you have sometimes you have surpluses, and these surpluses you can use them to produce hydrogen. There I see the viability, but not in a country like Switzerland, because it's just too expensive. That's the other point. It's very expensive, and I think it will stay expensive for a longer time still.
Antonio, from an international perspective, one sentence or maximum two?
Yeah, one sentence. I mean, we are talking about also hydrogen as a derivative of other industrial processes. In this case, yes, it's a resource that we can use. If we have to produce the hydrogen on site, it depends, as Andrea was saying, from the economical context.
Yes, and I think it's always important to mention hydrogen is a battery, like any other battery. So it's not a primary energy source, first of all. And secondly, it needs to be green hydrogen, so being produced from renewable energies. And there we need a lot of sun to make it, which might make it work.
I think we should use it in mobility and not in heat.
Also, yes, good point. So we are coming to the end of our panel. I would like to make a quick last round with all of you. So why do you think that we should realize energy district, and what is from your point of view, the most important ingredient for a future successful energy district? Andreas, Peter, let's start with you.
I think in the long-term view, energy districts can be very efficient and can help to reduce the carbon dioxide exhaust.
Antonio.
District cooling makes sense, and this generally makes sense when we have satisfied different criteria what we spoke at the beginning, but mainly we have to deploy these solutions where it makes sense. We cannot deploy this business model everywhere. So high density is very important, clear urban planning, involvement of municipality and government in to push the system forward, and having good investors that are familiar with this business model. These are all important ingredients to be successful, of course, with some policy framework that incentivize all that towards sustainability and net zero carbon targets.
Andreas Hurni.
I can also confirm what Antonio is saying. It's very important to apply energy districts in densely populated areas where you have enough density of heat or cooling demand. Otherwise, it's not economically viable. And outside of these densely populated areas, you need individual solutions, or maybe small, very small energy districts for a small area that sometimes could also work. But you have a combination of energy districts in some parts of the cities and individual solutions in the rest of a city or a municipality.
Thanks a lot. Maybe I can add one additional point from my side. Climate change is working in favor of district cooling and against district heating. So I think that district cooling will become even more interesting in the future, because the times where we need it are longer and longer. And this is from an investment point of view also a point to be considered quite coolly. So now we have additional questions, but sorry, time has run out. So thanks a lot to all of you. I think it was a very interesting panel. Not a lot of contradictions. We all were thinking in the same direction, but I hope that we could give some direction also to the participants in this panel. And Andreas, and Antonio, thanks again, and good to have had you with us, and thanks to the organizers.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bueno, pues muchísimas gracias a ti, Tomás, gracias a nuestro ingeniero Thomas Stetter, que nos acompañó en este panel, y muchísimas gracias a todos nuestros expertos internacionales por compartir sus conocimientos y experiencias del aprovechamiento de recursos energéticos residuales y renovables en los distritos térmicos. Señores, muchísimas gracias a Andreas Peter, a Antonio, gracias por acompañarnos en este congreso.
Muchas gracias a vosotros.